We have 6 days until we decide the fate of the country. And last night, President Joe Biden caused controversy for his choice of words when referring to Donald Trump supporters. Listen to this.
Or Puerto Rico, where I'm in my home state of Delaware, they're good, decent, honorable people. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization is seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American.
Here to discuss all of this is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Kevin Roberts. He's the president of the Heritage Foundation. So, Kevin, I mean, these are the comments. Everybody is talking about them. So what do you make of the garbage out there?
Gosh, Jill, in my adult life, I've been called garbage yesterday by the President of the United States, deplorables, irredeemable, clinger to guns in my Bible. That, by the way, happens to be true, as it is for a majority of Americans. All of that to say, we are the ones who are accused by the radical left of using dangerous rhetoric when all we're doing is trying to reform the centralization of power in D.C. They are the ones who are guilty of this. It's total projection. But the good news, Jill, for those of us looking forward to returning to normal in this country, I think it's going to backfire politically, and it's already doing so today.
Yeah, Kamala, right, came out and clarified the comments. So say more about that. I mean, how do you think this is already playing? What do you mean it's going to backfire?
It was backfiring within an hour or two of President Biden saying it. By that, as you know, Matt, Vice President Harris was giving this supposedly great speech in Washington, D.C. How telling, by the way, that she would initiate her closing argument in the imperial city, as opposed to doing so, say, in a regular city with ordinary Americans. But that issue aside, at this exact same time she's giving that speech, President Biden does what we think is a mistake or an accident. Who knows? It could be purposeful. But the point is, by the end of the news cycle last night, that was the story that the President of the United States was calling half of the country garbage. It really overran the vice president's speech. I'm not sure there was anything in that speech in terms of substance that was new, other than to say the vice president continued this week-long, I think, purposeful effort to be using a lot of dark rhetoric. Interestingly, what has happened 24 hours in is that the American people are drawing the conclusion, these people do hate us. They do not want us to have any political power.
Well, and the lines are very clearly drawn this election cycle. And I've heard a lot of people of faith saying, I don't know, maybe I'm going to vote, maybe I'm not going to. When it comes down to it, is this just the most critical election that you've seen for people of faith this time around?
It is in my lifetime. I'm exactly half a century old. Every presidential election is important. As you know, Jill and Matt, I've spent some time studying history. I can come up with a lot of examples of presidential elections that really were pivotal for the future of the country. This one in our lifetimes, I think, is at the top of the list. And this is the reason why. It isn't just about the centralization of power in D.C., although that would be sufficient enough. It's that the radical left has moved on from merely having differences at the margins regarding taxation, regarding foreign policy, regarding the role of government and the individual. They're actually wanting to redefine the human person as an example. And rather than change their mind, which would be good as it relates to transgender ideology, they not only double down, but they demonize those of us who would be so radical as to suggest that boys are boys and girls are girls. This is the bottom line. If the radical left prevails in this election cycle, we're going to be combating in a political sense, not just the centralization of power and higher taxes and a terrible economy and ridiculous foreign policy. We're going to be combating people who have redefined the human person. Just as one example, we're going to be combating people who, at least at the state level, maybe even at the federal level, are going to try to legalize abortion all the way up until the 9th month. And finally, as someone of faith, and I guess sometimes people refer to me as perhaps a leader who speaks about religious liberty, certainly something I've tried to do in my career, I really do fear for our ability to worship. Wherever we go to church, whatever our teachings are in our respective churches, I really do believe it's not hyperbole to say that religious liberty is endangered if the radical left prevails in this election. For all of those reasons, people of faith really do need to study the issues. I can't make endorsements because of the tax designation at Heritage, but what I can do and state very plainly on the issues is that when you combine or you compare what the left wants to do versus what the right wants to do regarding religious liberty and all other issues related to people of faith, I think the choice is pretty clear.
Kevin, I have to bring this up because it's so important right now. And it's something that I know you've argued about, I'm sure, over the years, probably publicly as well as privately. But that is this. I have some friends who remain friends who I have given up trying to make this argument to because they don't like a certain personality so much that they refuse to vote for him. And the way in which they argue this is that as a person of faith, they just can't cross that bridge and vote for certain people that they really don't like, right? And it's odd to me that, I don't even know how to make that argument anymore, right? I don't even know what to say. But what do you say in those situations?
I've been having that argument with certain friends, perhaps some of the same people, Matt Peterson, since I had hair. And perhaps the fact that I don't have much suggests that I might be losing the argument. But all kidding aside, I would say two things. The first thing is we're electing a president, not a pastor. I told that to the national religious broadcasters. I should say suggested that to them as friends a few months ago in Nashville. And I think that was well received, not because of the messenger, me, but because of the message. It's true. But the second thing is, and I think this really leans on one of the most beautiful parts of Scripture, one that's certainly motivating for me, and I pray about often because it reminds me to try to stay humble. And that is the parable of the prodigal son. If, in fact, there is someone in this race with whom you agree for the most part on policy, but there's something about that person that you find disagreeable, that doesn't sit well with you, that perhaps that person used to issue mean tweets or uses rhetoric you don't like, how about we put ourselves in that particular story of the prodigal son? For those of us who are Christians, that not only might be any of us, it is by definition each of us, according to human nature. And maybe praying on that over the next 5 days could be helpful for people who right now are sitting on the sidelines.